Okay, so hello, how are you?
I
Um,
am good.
yeah, it's
How-
great to connect like this. So it looks like it's a really nice day where you are.
Yes,
Um,
it's beautiful, beautiful. Thank God.
and it's great to have you on. I know we've been talking about doing this for a little bit. Um,
Yeah.
can you just tell me a little bit who you are and a little bit about you and what you're doing?
Oh, that's a loaded question.
Or just your name, where you live?
So I'm a rabbi. I'm with the Chabad movement. We're the largest international Jewish outreach movement. We have thousands of centers, and really, if you want to call it, I mean, for a couple hundred years, the heart and soul of the Jewish people in terms of inspiration and kind of application. It really is a movement started by the Baal Shem Tov. Um, and I'm going to assume that participants don't know much about Hasidus, and so we'll give some background. The Baal Shem Tov was perhaps one of the greatest Jewish masters. He started a very, very inspirational, dynamic, you can't really call it a branch of Judaism because all Jews are united through their faith in God and also through their belief in the applicability of the God's commandments, which we'll speak about soon, because a lot of people don't know that God doesn't only have commandments for Jews in the Bible, but he has commandments specifically for Gentiles. So God has, in fact, one religion for two people, which is Judaism for Jews and the seven Noahide Laws for Gentiles. And of course, we're united in our the spiritual truth. So the Baal Shem Tov really invigorated Judaism with very sometimes religions can get almost ritualistic. So he really focused on what is God's core desire, which is love, which is unity, also a focus on the coming of the Mashiach. And really, I mean, even the fact that we're having this conversation, yourself with the Christian background, and the many, many Christians around the world are embracing Jews, sort of, I think you mentioned it the other day to me, the prophecy that the wolf will lie with the lamb. One of the commentaries that the Jews and Gentiles that had some bad blood in the past will have good blood. And really, because from my perspective, within the revelation of Judaism, within the revelation of the Torah, there was what we call the oral Torah. So there wasn't only the kind of Facebook value, what you see, not to compare Facebook in any way to the Torah, but there wasn't only the value of, when you're looking at the Torah, the Bible, what you read. There's a lot deeper. In fact, there's infinite deeper. Every single verse has five layers of interpretation: Pshat, Remez, Side, the simple, the deeper, and it goes like four levels of deep, and then it goes on to an infinite level where you can draw infinite inspiration from every verse. So the Baal Shem Tov really came to reveal that infinite level. The previous four levels were revealed before him, but as we're approaching and somewhat within the Messianic era, the ultimate revelation from God is here, it's accessible, and the Baal Shem Tov came to reveal it. And the disciple after the Baal Shem Tov was called the Maggid, and he had many great disciples. They took the wisdom of the Baal Shem Tov, the Maggid, they really fanned it all throughout Eastern Europe, which in a way was the bulk of Jewish scholarship, which really impacted the entire Jewish world. Our branch called Chabad, as mentioned, is the largest Jewish outreach. It's one of the branches, but probably the most, if you want to call it, philosophically erudite branch. We study from very young age tremendous amounts of Jewish philosophy. As I mentioned, I'm an ordained rabbi as well. I've written, just to give me some street cred here, I've written about 20 books. And my blog, Kabbalah Wisdom, we've put out about 80,000 blogs. So we have a little bit, it's a big wide world out there, but a little bit of a presence. And, like touched by the light and trying to spread it.
Okay, did I hear you correctly? You've written about 20 books?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh my gosh, I didn't realize that. Wow. And so I also didn't realize that you're affiliated with Chabad. And that is one of my favorite places, like go-to information for when I'm looking up references and information.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
actually, there's quite a few good teaching lessons through there as well that I've gotten onto and listened to. So are you're actually affiliated with them as well? Are you writing stuff for them too, or
Sure. I
Chabad?
mean, I'm a
Yeah.
little associated
Oh, I see.
with the
Okay.
website
Uh-huh.
in more in an advisory role, but
Okay.
yeah, no, I'm not really much of a kind of direct participant in that
Yeah.
content. Yeah,
Tazi Freeman, do you know him? I think that's his name, Tazi Freeman. Am I saying
V
it?
Freeman. Yeah,
How do you say it?
excuse me. Excuse me.
Okay.
Got a
Uh,
little cold here.
yeah.
Svi. Yeah. So
Oh,
it's Svi.
he's my
So
fave. Yeah, I love
he's your
listening to him.
favorite. Yeah, he's a
Yeah,
very good writer, great
yeah,
writer,
yeah,
tremendously beautiful
yeah,
content. Very,
yeah.
very
I read his
real.
notifications every day. I get a notification,
Oh,
and
nice,
I kind of wake up to it. Um,
nice, nice.
yeah. So now I have got one of your books, anyways, right here,
Yes,
God's Guide, a Modern Divine Guide.
yes.
And yeah, I've been through this book here, which was a suggestion by you when we first met,
Hmm.
that this would be a good book for me, which I enjoyed it. It's talking about the relationship of the Jews to the Gentiles and just kind of the basics on how Judaism sees our relationship. Did
Hmm.
you want to expand on the book and also the uh, your views on all of that?
Okay. You ask very good open-ended questions. So,
Not to put you on the spot.
no, 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 that's good. I don't mind. I don't mind. I'll
Yeah.
just have to give you a very good open-ended answer.
Okay.
So, first of all, in terms of the book, you asked first about the book, and then second of all, you asked about the relationship between Jews and Gentiles. So, the book, in a way, is a very special book. Um, it's special because not only does it go through the seven Noahide laws, and what that is the Jewish belief is that, we all come from Adam and Eve. In fact, scientists have proven DNA, we all come from one woman. So we all come from Adam and Eve. Um, and God gave Adam 6 commandments, and those 6 commandments were not to worship idols, not to curse God, not to commit adultery, God forbid, which includes immoral sexual acts. We have to live with respect for the family life. Today there's some kind of crazy perversion. I mean, usually when there's a, kind of good capital and safety, the sex drive just goes haywire, but it's a very, very holy thing. And people have to recognize that God expects us to use it in a holy way. And the holy way, of course, is through the sacred bond of marriage. And I'm just commenting on that because it's just gone out of whack in many different circles. But part of being a human is having holiness, is having sacredness, is having doing the right thing. And so that's just an important thing to comment on. Then of course not to steal. And also very, very important, again, there's an attack on this, which is really ridiculous, but it's important to comment on it. God wants us to have a justice system. So I'll speak a little bit about maybe the contrast of Jewish law, etc. But Jewish law goes into tremendous detail, and a lot of our laws are actually based on Jewish law. It goes in to tremendous detail of how that justice system works. You have the Rambam, 14 books on code of Jewish law, and really, property rights. If you didn't have property rights, if you didn't own your house, you'd have a big problem. So the idea that I can own something and the law has to protect that is very fundamental to living a healthy, civilized way. Even that you have a right to your body, you have a right to your physical safety. These are very, very important things. And then again, there's attack from the BLM, anti-police. These are really anarchists that want to really destroy civilization. And, you need, of course, there can always be better laws, but you need a justice system. And it was actually in Canada, Montreal, Canada, one day the police went on strike. You can look it up. The place went haywire in one day, bank robberies, murders. So the fact of the matter is that it's actually a Islamic quote, which is better I think the quote is something like better one day, or better 1,000 years of tyranny than one day of anarchy. Because, and even though, that's a bit of a harsh quote, but the point is that law and order are necessary. And in the end of the day, the idea of Judaism, as I mentioned to you before, Shani, is that God says, I hold you accountable. It's not like society is accountable. No, you are part of society and you are accountable for your part in society. So we all have to take responsibility for the fact that we live with other people. We have to respect them, they have to respect us, and there has to be a justice system. Otherwise, what happens is people that are basically, psychopathic, they lack, for whatever reason, usually it's sad, but they lack any compassion, and their instincts take over. They will rape, murder, kill, and that has been proven in Louisiana, when they had the lack of the police force due to the Hurricane Katrina. Again, in one day, gangs took over, and it was very, very violent. It was terrible. So God wants us to have a justice system. Now, the sixth law was given to Noah, and that was effectively not to eat from an animal while it's still living. An animal has to be killed before it's eaten. If you want to call it compassion to animals. And this creates a foundation of morality for all people. So that's really what the book is about. But the book goes a little bit deeper because, every generation has what we believe is a Moses. In fact, in the Bible, God says that I'll appoint like a Moses in every generation. And our generation was the Lubavitcher Rebbe. You're good at pictures. You might want to put a picture of him on. And the Rebbe really was this great, great leader. And basically, he taught that the secrets of Jewish mysticism, which really began to be revealed by the Baal Shem Tov, tremendous, beautiful insights. I have another book called Kabbalah Love. I speak about some of these secrets in this book, but Kabbalah Love goes into a lot more detail, a lot of great, great wisdom. You can even go to KabbalahLove.org and even download a PDF of the book, available on Amazon, all that kind of stuff. But the bottom line is that these things are universally applicable. We all have souls, we all have struggles, we all have, one of the great teachings that I teach is that the first thing you do in the morning is you have to thank God for your blessings. And if you start your day with gratitude, the rest of the day you'll feel good. So there are very simple techniques that are applicable for Jews and Gentiles. And some of them I mentioned in the book. And, if you want to highlight some of them and discuss, I'm happy to. And then I'll just conclude your open-ended question with my open-ended answer. You were asked about the relationship of Jews and Gentiles. So that's actually a really good question. And I know, Shani, you're really, really into that subject. So the story is like this, that, we were discussing earlier a little bit about the male-female relationship. And it's actually a really good example for the relationship of the Jew and the Gentile, because really, what it represents, in a way, the male-female relationship represents it. Everything is basically the same dynamic, just in different applications of the dynamic. And what the dynamic is there's a body-soul relationship. Now, we are comprised basically of 7 different parts. We all have within us God. The essence of the human being is God. The essence of everything is God. Without God, there is nothing. And it's a very big subject. I don't want to go too detailed, but that's just the story. And God, of course, doesn't have any shape. He doesn't have any form. It's interesting, the ancient Romans called Jews atheists. Why? Because they believed in a God which cannot be seen. And so it was a radical concept for a physical person that perceives the world through his physical eyes and the limitation of time and space and objects, to say that there's a being that cannot be seen, that has no form, and he is the one that creates all forms. So if God cannot be seen and he has no dimension, so what is he? So effectively you can say that he is goodness. That's what he is. He is pure, absolute goodness. Now, he also contains infinite ability. So he's goodness. Now, infinite ability, you could call the body of God, because my body basically gives me abilities. It gives me the ability to walk, the ability to talk, the ability to think. But all those abilities are not me. Those are expressions of my soul. So my soul is this part of God, which is this goodness in me, this, if you want to call it my compassion, my conscience within me, and a life force that exists, that itself is quite a miracle. And then it uses the body, even my brain, it uses the brain for the expression. Now, that's kind of the highest part of ourselves. Of course, we also have a brain, which makes us different to animals. We are the only ones that have prefrontal lobes. I don't want to go into too much detail, but the human being has what we would call an intellectual soul. So an animal doesn't have an intellectual soul. Animals can be highly intelligent. Bees, in fact, calculate and communicate distances to flowers better than supercomputers can do. However, that's quite an amazing statement if you actually think about it. However, they only follow what their instincts compel them to do. They never say, why am I a bee? They don't ask existential questions because they don't have a brain that's separated from their emotion. And we do have that. We have curiosity. We have this capacity, even just to look at the world and look at an ant or a group of ants and say, what's going on here? Be fascinated. And in a way, the brain is a gateway to God, because when you look at the world and you see it's just this complexity and the amazing science, you realize how great God must be to create all of this. As Einstein said, he says, don't worry about your mathematical problems. The universe calculates everything instantaneously. Everything is really very, very sophisticated math. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but it's all functioning. It's all working. And if any of the math was off, the whole thing couldn't function. So it's a great miracle. And the mind, in a way, is objective, right? The mind is telling you information. Now, the mind, of course, is influenced by the heart. We're not unique in a way. We have what's called an animal soul. We also, like an animal, basically, what does the animal seek? It seeks to have pleasure and not have pain. And so we also seek that. And there are various things that give us pleasure. That's why people can get addicted. That's why people can get phobic, because there's a stimuli which they want to repeat or which they really don't want to repeat. And that creates a compulsion either towards or away from. It's a big subject, not going too much into it. Then, how are we doing?
No, very good. Yeah, thank you. You're giving me a really good breakdown here. Yeah.
Okay, so let's continue. So then within us, we also have an ego. And the ego is kind of a very important part of the human being. It's very interesting because in some Eastern faiths, it's all about kind of anti-ego. But the irony is the ego, the example that I give for the ego, it's like the gas in the car. You don't have gas in the car, you ain't going nowhere. But if you just have a fire, the whole thing burns down. So the point is, it's not about not having an ego, it's about using your ego for the right thing. And the ego is very much attached to the identity. That's another part that we have. And that is, who are we? What is our self-image? And so, very much this is something that the Rebbe taught, and it's a very, very important philosophy. And I was speaking to you about this before. Everybody, in a way, wants unity. Yet, for some reason, unity is very elusive. For literally, if we're wise, we look at history. We take a big brush and we look at the big picture. We don't just look at one little detail. So we look at all of human history. Basically, there were wars all the time. So why were there these wars? If people like unity, why are there wars? So the answer is that sometimes people actually, it's called game theory, where they basically give up on the notion of love. I don't want to go into this in too much detail. I want to focus on the main point. But basically they've been, I don't know if the word is abused, or they've been verbally shamed, and they've been, there's a jealousy of love, of everything that's good. So somebody who's lacking that is somebody himself a victim of being kind of pushed out of the, let's call it the circle of love. So the other parts in them are still functioning. They may even still have, I mean, they definitely still have their godly soul. They may still have some compassion and conscious and all these things, but they're lacking that emotion of connection, of feeling one, basically. And so therefore there's a jealousy of that. And when one person subconsciously becomes jealous of another, then the brain, which is basically a tool, like your computer is a tool just to do what you want, basically. So the brain basically takes your highest desire and it tries to give it to you. And when that highest desire becomes jealousy, it's often connected to fear as well. So, and that's really why there was anti-Semitism. It becomes, the person kind of can become a bully, and what they're doing is they're trying to make other people feel bad as well. And so then you get a situation where people can basically get quite vicious because they don't, they're lacking that emotion of connection, which allows us to kind of forego and forgive because we want to keep that emotion. We want to keep that fire burning. But if that fire is not burning, then another fire can take over, which is just like a narcissistic desire for power. And so, ironically, in game theory, which was made by von Neumann, very great, actually a Jewish man, a scientist from Hungary, he also came up with algorithms. He made the computer, so he was no fool by any stretch of the imagination. So he speaks about game theory where people have this kind of tendency to basically be vicious. But when they realize that that is not in their interest, so after 2 world wars, basically the West woke up and they're like, this is not okay. We cannot continue in this way. And so then the main desire now is to have peace. So you see the desire changed. And with that desire comes kind of the ability to get it, because everything that we achieve in life, we have to have a desire for it. And so, in a certain sense, we can flip into another kind of philosophy, which is like everything goes. Okay, because I want peace, therefore, in order to have peace, you have to basically forgive and forgo. So I'm just going to forgive and forgo everything. But that doesn't work either, because then you can get into some kind of bizarre ideologies where people, let's say, if you want to call it on the left, where there's an ideology of peace and love ostensibly, and yet they're embracing terrorism, they're embracing terrorists. You can't only say I accept everybody, you also have to have distinction. So there's a third way, and this is really the way of God, and this is the way of Judaism, which is a combination of the good of both sides. In other words, on one hand, we look at ourselves as responsible people, and we're responsible to God. God has commanded, God created each and every one of us, and he created our roles. Again, we have to address this bizarre idea, no such thing as men and women, which of course, it's like the emperor's clothing. It's the craziest thing that's come to this planet. But every part of every male female DNA has a chromosome which makes the person male or female. So the whole thing is just beyond ridiculous. But the point is that being a male, being a female, being a Jew, being a Gentile, understanding your responsibility in your identity is a good thing, because one of the big problems of today is people don't feel that they matter, right? They feel there's suicide is a major contributing factor of death, especially amongst young people. That means that they don't feel valuable, they don't feel valued. And so, ironically, the Jewish religion, which comes and tells us that you have a responsibility, right? It's not only you have an opportunity, do this, you'll get that. No, you have a responsibility. You're a creation of God. You have a responsibility to make the world into a godly place that gives you meaning, that gives you purpose. And suddenly your life takes on a sense of value because of your responsibility. And then the flip side is that it also creates a sense of unity, because ironically, for there to be unity, there has to be individualized role. Why? Because if we're all doing the same thing, then basically there's not unity, there's sameness. And if we're all doing different things, then there's also not unity. But if you have a team and each person on the team has a different role, but it's complementary, then and only then do you have unity. And so, if we wanted to basically speak on broad strokes about what are our individualized roles, so obviously it goes without saying that there's the role of a male and there's a role of a female, and together they hopefully can create a family, which is obviously the first commandment of God, have children, because through that you have life. Without that, there is no life. Something that those people that are kind of against it seem to fail to understand, that actually that their entire society is going to disappear. There are countries in Europe that have passed the point of no return. They will disappear within 100 years because they're just not having enough children. So the selfish kind of me attitude uh, will only work for a very short period of time, because eventually there will be no more me's to say I want to just be selfish. So just again, a very basic concept of what is true is obviously what is going to be perpetual. So getting back to this idea that God is telling the Jewish people that you are kind of the soul of the world. You are the light unto the nations. I'm giving you an extra amount of responsibility. Be very holy. All these, we have 613 commandments that we're obligated to do. And it doesn't make us better in any way to a Gentile. The way I see it, God says, B'ni b'char Yisrael, the Jewish people are my firstborn. So we all know psychologically you put your most emphasis on the firstborn. In fact, even in the Torah, it speaks about that you should give a double share of the inheritance to the firstborn, because he kind of got the brunt of the father's expectations, which is important because the other children need a role model. So the way I see it, and if you paint it in very broad strokes, God really kind of gave it very, very difficult to the Jewish people. First they were in Egypt, and then 40 years of greatness in the desert. But they didn't have it easy when they were living in Israel for 1,300 years. They were attacked, they were this. And eventually the base of Mikdash was ransacked. If we didn't have persecution, we would have at least 500 million Jews today. We're at 15 million just in our own generation, a third of the Jews. You have to imagine what that means. Out of 15 million people, a third getting murdered just for being Jewish. It's ridiculous stuff. So it was not easy being a Jew. And yet, God did that, I think, because he wanted there to be a people that represent truth, that represent to the rest of the world that, whatever you believe in, just do it. Have the power of your convictions. And I think that's what the Jewish people really bring to the world, that they have a certain set of convictions and ideals, and they do it. Even if it costs them their life, they do it. And so we all then are able to rise a little bit higher in our own convictions and say, well, if there's a group of people that are able to give their life for their convictions, there's no reason why I can't give. And now today we don't have to sacrifice our lives for anything, but we have to sacrifice our life to something. We have to live with an idealism. And Shani, I think that's really special about you, that you've become spiritual, but many people have. And this is a really, really good thing, because we're in the times of the Mashiach, where God is really revealing himself. It says that nobody will teach one another, for all will know me. And basically, there is a direct divine connection going on now, which is a very, very beautiful thing. So if I had to sum it up, I think that, two things are true. The first is what we just said, that there is a direct connection that God has individually with each person. And in fact, the Rebbe gives a beautiful example. He uses a computer, and he says that just like a computer can hold all this information, so too, like technically every single person can be using one computer, right? I mean, when you tap into the GPS or Google, it's basically one giant server servicing everybody. So there can be one mind, one God who's servicing each and every one of us individually and helping us all individually. And Google also, they don't just give you an answer, they give you specified answers. They know exactly who's asking the question. So they know if you're male, they know if you're female. So if you're asking for a job, they'll give you something that's more appropriate to you. And so in other words, it's not just like a random kind of body of information, it is very, very specified. So our relationship with God is specific. He knows us. He wants to help us from where we're up to go to where we need to go. And that's an infinite process. But there's also a very basic reality that we have to ascribe to. And that basic reality is that, I mean, the only time that there was a revelation witnessed by an entire nation was when God gave the Bible, which is something that's believed by basically Jews, Christians, Muslims, that, you know, the prophecy of Moses. And that's really effectively the only time where millions of people saw simultaneously, you know, hopefully when the Messiah is revealed, we'll see everybody, the whole world will see. But until that time, there was the only time, and there are many religions, but one person saw, 12 people saw, whatever, a couple of people saw. But you don't have any religion that claims an entire nation, millions of people saw this. And so basically the tradition that we received from then, and that's really what we study as Jews, is that tradition is that we all are commanded by God. We all have, whether you're a Jew or a Gentile, whether it's 613 commandments, whether it's 7 commandments, you have a basic commandment. And really, in a certain sense, it boils down to kind of have faith, don't question God. You know, I spoke to this Holocaust survivor today, and he escaped the Nazis 10 times. And he has like this dilemma in his mind, like, is there a God? Isn't there a God? You know, if there is a God, how come his whole family died? If there isn't a God, how did he survive? So this is what he's been struggling with. He's 97 years old. But the point of the matter is, I did a little talk on it, and I said, maybe there's a different question. The question is not what is reality. The question is, what is my role in reality? And that's the question we have to be asking. And that's the responsibility that I have to take, which is saying that if I am here, I have a responsible role, and I have to do that. And a lot of what secularism really is doing is they're trying to say, well, really, you're just an advanced form of an ape. They're trying to take away responsibility, because responsibility takes effort. And people by nature are lazy. They don't want to be responsible. But it doesn't work, because you can't feel good from doing nothing. You know, you can feel perhaps a little lazy, but you can't feel accomplished from it. And so the irony of life is that you can only feel good by doing good. And in fact, it has to cost you. It has to be difficult, not very difficult, but it has to take effort, because only when you do something that costs, that has effort, can you feel good about it. So God gave us these two sides. He gave us what we would call the Yetzer Hara, if you want to call it the Satan, a challenge to our goodness, a challenge even to our joy, a challenge to love. And it's a big challenge. You know, all these things are obvious, and yet they're so difficult, because God wanted everything good to come through effort, because then we can feel proud of ourselves and he can reward us for it. And so in conclusion, I would just say that, you know, there are 3 main things that I've mentioned. And from the Jewish perspective, the first is spirituality, which we all share in common. And we're in a very spiritual time. If you're looking for it, Chabad.org, again, has a lot of wonderful things. My books have a lot of wonderful collection of ideas as well. The second thing is there is the basic commandments of God, which we have to do because he is our God and we follow him. And the third is that those commandments aren't rigid. They're actually complementary. They give us meaning in life. And because, like the male and female, you know, again, many relationships are going sour, which is very sad. Millennials have a 70% divorce rate, which is amazing. And that's because I think that there isn't a good definition that I am the man and you are the woman. And when you have those definitions and you have respect for the other person, respect for their role, so then you begin to have a good relationship. And that's something that I blogged the other day. I think I shared it with you, that real love, you know, we think about love in the West as lust. Oh, a million songs and movies and poems and all about love. But it's not love. It's about self-interest. Real love is respect, where I respect the other person's value system. I respect their basically desire to be good. And when you have respect, then you have commitment. And so I'll just conclude with that basically the more we respect ourselves and realize that we are respected by God, that's a very important thing to understand. We're not only kind of God's little children that he loves, he respects us. He knows that we're capable of being good. And then we are the ones that kind of beat the dark side. We are the ones that he empowers to bring the light and to bring the Mashiach. Okay, so that's a bit of a long answer to a short
That's
question.
very, very good, though. Very, very good. And you more than thoroughly answered my questions. And it's really good just to get that summary from you, because we've been talking for a little bit, but I never really actually heard, your whole heart, and direction with all of that.
Yeah.
And just from my perspective, the way that I look at the Jews, when my world opened up to having the Jews in my life, that's when my world really opened up. It complemented what
Hmm.
it complemented my journey already, and it gave me more of a foundation. It gave me more grounding, and understanding too the way that God came to the Jewish people for the world. I look at it the way that you've mentioned it as well, is that they are like my big brother. That's the other relationship that I feel that we have, and and it's not about who's better, who's worse, or whatever either. I don't see a man-woman relationship that way, where it has to be a dominant sort of relationship. It's just basically a role. They're two different roles. And like you said, when we start to respect who we are, we know our identity, we know who we are, and then we can respect the other and see the complement that we have together. Then we're able to see ourselves as a whole, as working together instead of working against each other. And that's what a lot of relationships are doing, even just, within our male-female relationships. So we definitely do have a lot of work to do, but I feel like the world is making that switch. We're realizing, all our bad habits, and we want to change. I think the world is ready for a change, and I think that the change is happening in all of the relationships, all at the same time. So it really is a really beautiful time, as well as a very chaotic time. But all of this as well, it is prophetic. It is, we're all feeling it. We're feeling like something big has to happen. Otherwise, we're not going to survive going on the way that we've been going on. So I think it's really great that we had this big chat. Is there anything else that you would like to add, or any suggestions that you have for the audience of, this message is going to be going to a lot of Gentiles. Is there anything else that you want to say, any advice that you have for them, any resources that they should be looking at to maybe learn more about the Jewish people? Jewish people are not scary people. What can we do to start to get to know you a little bit better and understand a little bit more about the Judaism faith? I don't know. Is there anything else that you want to add, or?
Well, I would just say that, first of all, my book is a good resource. And maybe you could just give people a link to it.
Yes. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna put on my blog. I'll end up putting up, all of the links and everything, how to get a hold of you, your books and things like that. And this one here that you got me to read. It's just a small little book and lots of good stuff in it. Yeah. So I guess we can leave it like that. And I'll just I'll put some extra information, along with my blog and then the video. So and how to
Yeah.
get.
Also, I just want to also mention my book, Kabbalah Love,
Uh-huh.
is also packed with a lot of great information. Those two books itself, The Divine Guide, and Kabbalah Love, really will give people a tremendous foundation. And I would just conclude, I think that in a certain sense, we're in a time where, each person has to kind of take personal responsibility for their morality, for their destiny, for their divine connection.
For sure.
And I think that that is what God wants. Meaning, we had times of very great leaders, and ironically, that when you're, let's say, in the desert with Moses, um, you may not fully develop your own spiritual potential because the light is so great that there's almost no need to really dig deep down into your own personality. What do I want? What do I believe? What do I think? So I think the irony of the times that we're living in is that there's this like perfect contrast of like almost infinite light and infinite darkness. And that contrast allows us, if we seek it, to say, okay, so what is the light and what is the darkness? So if a person's not thinking, um, you may appreciate this. There was a Russian writer, a Gentile, who said that, if you're not looking for the truth and you see a Jew, you don't see anything. But if you're looking for the truth and you see a Jew, you see everything. So in other words, we're living in a time where I think that we have to kind of take personal responsibility. I don't see the Moseses of the world anymore. But that doesn't mean that God isn't the God of the world. He always was, he always is, and he always will be. And in fact, he's totally connectable today. They say whatever happens in the physical realm is a mirror of the spiritual realm. So today we can connect like never in human history. And so that's because our connection to God can be that great. So I think that we're in a time that we shouldn't be placing false hopes on some kind of leader, even Jewish leader. We have to basically be connecting to, I mean, authentic sources, which I believe, through Judaism we have, and going directly within our own minds and within our own hearts to the information, to what resonates with us. Everything in the end of the day is about growth, about self-development. So it's a personal journey, and it's a beautiful journey, and it's a growing journey, and basically connecting directly to God. And each individual, if we are a light, imagine everybody did that, then the world would be bright. And so I think that instead of placing kind of false hopes that some kind of, obviously we're looking forward to messianic revelation, but until such time, each person has a little bit of the Messiah, has a bit of God within them. And they have to realize that, they have to express that, they have to be it. And when they do that, then they become a source of light. And so each person, by doing this, I think is going to fulfill their personal goal, the goal that God has for them, and the world will be a beautiful place.
That's beautiful. And yeah, I'm totally on board with that. Yeah, that's awesome. So yeah, let's hope we connect to that source, and we start wanting to understand ourselves a little bit better in a better light, like you mentioned.
Lovely,
So
lovely.
okay, so let's conclude. I'm going to stop this recording.
Okay.